Greeting class, again, it's Mr. Calvin here, and today's topic we will be dealing with percents and how it relates to fractions. Okay, so this pretty much summarizes everything that we've dealt with up until this point here, and specifically we will be dealing with percents here. So let's take a look at that. And by now, I've introduced you to some features on your calculator, which I'm just going to mention in some of the examples for today. And in class, I should have mentioned already the use of the fraction key there. So that's going to come in handy. And that's going to, again, just move things along when it comes to taking fractions and putting them into lowest terms. So if you have your calculator handy, by all means, have it in front of you. And then just work along with your calculator as I go through those examples where we do need to do that. All right, so let's get right to it here. And basically what we're dealing with percent is that the word percent itself deals with one number and one number only, and that's the number of 100. So for example, when you get your average and 94%, what that 94% represents is 94 out of 100. Okay, so basically what we want to do here is that percent can be expressed in different ways. Now you notice that 12%, there's a sign there that beside the number. Okay, that's an example of the percent sign there. And basically what we want to do here is that anytime you see that symbol, the number 100 comes into play. And basically what we're going to see here is that when we have something like that, okay, in this case here, when we have something like 15% and you're expressing it as a fraction, what 15% is 15 over 100. Okay, and anytime you have a fraction, you must always express it as a fraction in lowest terms. So let's just quickly review how we can do that the long way. Okay, and we do that by taking a look at 15 over 100, and the common factor to 15 and 100 is going to be 5. So when we divide 15 here by 5, that gives me 3, and we divide 100 here by 5, that gives me 20. And that's how we get a fraction of 3 over 20, which happens to be the fraction in lowest terms for 15 over 100. Now, when I've introduced you to the fraction key, and you can try this on your own here. Okay, when you punch in 15, okay, press that fraction key or the ABC key that I told you about, and you put 100, and then press equals. Notice it automatically gives you the fraction. Okay, so for the remaining examples here, just to move things along, okay, you can do that when we're dealing with taking the fractions and putting them into lowest terms here. Okay, now that's how we can take the 15% here and express it as a fraction. And another way you can do this is that when we have 15%, okay, and you know it's out of 100. When you take the 15 and divide it by 100, you can also express it as a decimal. So when you take 15% and you divide it by 100, that gives us 0.15. And this is also going to become really handy when we're dealing with calculating things like discount and tax, where we actually need to do that conversion first before we actually get to the problem itself there. All right? Okay, so let's take a look at expressing percent as decimals in a fraction. Okay, so you're going to see here, we're going to take each of those percentages on the left side and perform the exact sequence of steps and how we can go from one form to the other. So for example, when I have a percent here, 50%, okay, we express that as a fraction simply by taking 15, putting it over 100. Now, every fraction must be expressed in lowest terms, so you can use a fraction key as 50 over 100, which reduces itself to 1 over 2. Now, for the decimal, all you would need to do there is to take the 50 divided by 100, which will give us 0.5. Okay, and if you do the same thing with 1 and 2, 1 divided by 2, it also gives you 0.5. Okay, so either way will give you the same decimal. Okay, so let's do 86%, which is 86 over 100. And if you take that and put into lowest terms, okay, it's going to be 43 over 50. So for the decimal there, you can either take the 86 divided by 100, or you can take the 43 and divide it by 50. Either way, you will get 0.86 as the decimal. And last but not least, we have 22%. So that's going to be 22 over 100, okay, which reduces itself to 11 over 50. Okay, and just like we did the previous examples, when you divide any of those two fractions into each other, either 22 divided by 100 or 11 divided by 50, that's going to give you 0.22. All right, now, when you're dealing with percents, fractions, and decimals, you can go from one form to the other simply by multiplying or dividing, as you can see. So for example, if I have a decimal of 0.22, okay, and I want to change it back to a percent, all I would need to do here is to take 0.22, multiply it by 100, and that will give me 22, okay, or 22% over here. Okay, and now in this lesson, we will see how we can take a decimal and change it into a fraction. So that's going to be an example we're going to see in today's lesson. All right, moving along here. The next thing we're going to do here is we're going to express fractions as a percent. So common question that people get when they get their quizzes or tests back, what percentage did I get? This is exactly what that calculation is involved in. And basically what you have to do here is that you have to take the fraction, okay, change it to a decimal first by dividing it. So the first thing we're going to do here, we're going to take the 16 divided by 20, okay, and from there take that decimal and multiply it by 100. And again, what we have there, 16 divided by 20 gives me 0.8, and then 0.8, you multiply that to 100, and that'll give us 80%. Now you notice when you're expressing something as a percent, okay, after you divide the fraction to each other and multiply it by 100, you do need to put that symbol at the end there. All right, so let's take a look at 25 over 37 here. So we're going to take the 25 divided by 37, okay, multiply it by 100. Now, when you have decimals that are either repeating or just keep on going here, okay, the best way or the most accurate way to do this is to express it to 4 decimal places in between. Okay, and you're going to see that when we multiply the 0.6757 times 100, it does give us the answer to the 2 decimal places that we need. Okay, and this is going to give us 67.57%. Okay, same thing for part C. We're going to take the 2, divide that by 11, and that gives me 0.1818, and we're going to multiply that by 100. Okay, that's going to give me 18.18%. And last but not least here, we have 13 over 16. We're going to divide that into each other, gives us a decimal, multiply that by 100, gives us 81.25%. Okay, so note that all 4 questions you see on the screen here were approached the exact same method. And just want to talk about examples B, C, and D for a moment. Again, just as I mentioned earlier here, anytime that you have numbers that are repeating or just keep on going, okay, always express it to 4 decimal places for accuracy. Okay, and then from there, just round it according to the number of decimal places required. All right, so the next example we're going to look at here is calculating the percent of a number. Okay, and what this involves and what this applies to is that when you're buying something and you're adding tax to something, this is exactly how it works here. So let's just take an example for part A. Okay, back in the day when tax in Ontario was 15%, this is exactly how it was calculated. Okay, so what we're going to do here is that anytime you see the percent symbol beside a number, the first thing you must always do is to change it into a decimal by dividing that number by 100. So the first little tiny step that we're going to do here is we're going to take the 15, okay, we're going to divide this by 100, and that gives me 0.15. Now, once you have it as a decimal, okay, by taking the number and dividing it by 100, you now need to take that number, okay, and you're going to multiply it to the number, which in this case here is 60. And when we do that, that gives us a number here of 9. And you notice that when you take the percent of a number, you are going to get a number as your final answer here. So how it relates to tax is the following. So back in the day when the Ontario tax was 15%, if you purchased something for $60, the tax on that item was $9. Okay, and then from there they would add that 9 to the $60. So you would buy something that cost $60 with tax would have been $69. That's exactly what it is. Okay. All right, so for part B over here, we have 22.5%. And again, what we want to do here is that anytime you see that percent symbol, always take that number and divide that by 100. Okay, and what that does here, it expresses it as a decimal as 0 point something. So in this case here, 22.5% now becomes 0.225. And when we do that, you take that, multiply it by 120, gives us 27. And last but not least here, we're now going to take 90%. We're going to take the 19, divide that by 100, gives me 0.19, multiply that by 1,100, and that gives me 209. Okay? All right, so the last thing that what I want to look at here is our decimal fractions, and this is now taking something as a decimal and being able to represent as a fraction and a fraction in lowest terms. And the way we do that actually goes back to the very first lesson that we did in this course dealing with place values over here. So what we want to do here is just to revisit the place values, because that's going to become important when we're looking at how to express a number as a fraction when we have a decimal. So remember that according to place values, this is going to be the tenths column, this is the hundredths column, and this one over here is thousands column. And as we go further to the right, okay, the place value increases. So the value after the 7, after the thousands there will be the 10,000s, etc. All right. Now that's going to be relatively important here in the next example here. And after that, once you express it as a fraction based on place value, you still need to convert it into a fraction in lowest terms here. Okay, so the first one again is been set up for you. So what we have here is 0.25. So step number 1 here, you always take a look at the last digit, which in this case here is the 5. Okay, and then you have to ask yourself, what place value does that 5 belong to? Now, if you take a look at the guide there, okay, the 5 belongs in the hundredths column. So what we're now going to do here, we're going to take the whole number here, which in this case here is 25, and then put it over 100. Okay. Now, in lowest terms there, whether you find a common factor or simply just use your fraction key, that becomes 1 over 4. All right. So you always take a look at the last digit, determine what place value it is. Okay, and then that will you take that number, okay, as a whole number, and you put it over whatever the place value is. Okay. All right. So for this next one over here, this 5 here, as you can see, that belongs in the thousands column. So what we want to do here is we're going to take the 375 and you're going to put it over 1,000. Okay, and we can reduce that, and that becomes 3 over 8. All right. Now that you've seen these two examples, I want you to take a look at examples C and D. Be very careful for part D. Okay, so 0.72, again, 0.72, always take a look at the last digit, which in this case here is 2. So if you take a look at the 2 there, that would belong in the hundredths column. So all we need to do here is to take 72 and put it over 100. And that in reduced terms there is going to be 18 over 25. All right, last but not least here for 0.6, okay? What we want to do here is to take a look at the 6 here first, and then I want you to take a look at the example there on the screen, and I want you just to ask yourself, what place value does that 6 belong to? Now, if you take a look at the 6 belongs in the tenths column. So what we're going to do with that 6 is put it over 10. That's all we have to do here. Okay, and that in lowest terms, that's going to be 3 over 5. Okay, so no matter how big or small your decimal is, okay, just make sure you put it over the correct number. So for example, if something's in the 10,000s column, all you would need to do is to take that that number as a whole and put it over 10,000, and obviously put it into lowest terms there. All right, so just remember those sequence of steps, and changing a decimal back into a fraction is no problem at all. Okay, so if you turn the page, you can now continue on working on the sample questions there, and I will see you in the next lesson.